50 of the world's most distinguished linguists sat in terrified silence. In the center of the room stood Julian Thorne, a billionaire known for destroying careers as quickly as he built empires. He had spent $10 million flying these experts to New York to decipher a single ancient sentence, and they had failed. The air was thick with tension, smelling of cold coffee and fear. But as Julian prepared to fire them all, a quiet sound broke the silence. It wasn't a professor or a scholar. It was the sound of a waitress, pouring water, correcting a mistake that had stumped the world's elite. And she did it in perfect, ancient Mandarin. The conference room on the 90th floor of the Thorne Tower was designed to intimidate. The walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a panoramic view of a rain-swept New York City. But no one was looking at the view. All eyes were fixed on the man pacing at the head of the obsidian table. Julian Thorne was 34 years old, with a net worth that rivaled the GDP of small countries and a temper that was legendary on Wall Street. He wore a bespoke suit that cost more than most people's cars, but right now he looked like a predator caged in a room full of incompetent prey. "Let me understand this correctly," Julian said, his voice dangerously low. He didn't shout. Julian never shouted. He whispered, and the world leaned in to listen. "I have flown you here from Oxford, Harvard, Beijing University, and the Sorbonne. I have cleared your schedules. I have paid your exorbitant consulting fees. And you are telling me that collective intellect of the 50 greatest linguistic minds on Earth cannot read 4 lines of text?" At the far end of the table, Professor Alistair Sterling, the chair of East Asian Studies at Cambridge, wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead. Sterling was a man used to adoration, not interrogation. "Mr. Thorne, please. You must understand the complexity. The artifact you recovered from the Shaanxi province. It predates Standard Pinyin. It predates the standard unification of script by the Qin dynasty. It is a dialect that has been dead for 2,000 years. I didn't pay you to tell me it's dead, Sterling. I paid you to make it speak," Julian snapped, slamming his hand down on the table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Lisa Vance flinched, nearly dropping the silver pitcher of water she was holding. She stood in the shadows near the service station, invisible to the powerful men and women in the room. She was just part of the furniture, a 24-year-old waitress from the catering agency, paid minimum wage to ensure glasses were filled and egos were hydrated. She adjusted her uniform, trying to make herself smaller. Her feet ached. She had been standing for 6 hours while these experts argued in circles. She knew she should just focus on the water glasses, but she couldn't help glancing at the massive digital screen behind Julian. On the screen was a high-resolution scan of a golden scroll, unearthed just 3 days ago. The characters were etched in a jagged, aggressive style, resembling claw marks more than brush strokes. "It is a primitive form of the seal script," Dr. Chen, a historian from Taipei, argued nervously. "It references a harvest. See this character? It resembles grain." "It is not grain, you fool," Sterling barked, happy to turn his frustration on a colleague. "The radical is inverted. It clearly denotes a military ranking. This is a list of generals." "Generals?" Julian turned, his eyes cold steel. "I am looking for the location of the Sun Tzu vault. The legend says the key is in the text. If this is a grocery list or a roll call, I have wasted my time." "It requires more study," Sterling said, trying to regain his dignity. "Give us 6 months." "You have 6 minutes," Julian said, checking his watch. "If I don't have a viable lead by the time the market closes, I am dissolving the contract, and I will sue each of your universities for fraud." The room erupted into chaos. 50 voices began shouting at once, arguing over syntax, radicals, and archaic grammar. It was a cacophony of panicked intellect. Lisa moved forward to refill Dr. Chen's glass. As she poured, her eyes locked onto the screen again. She felt a strange, magnetic pull. The characters weren't static to her. They didn't look like ink on gold. They looked like puzzle pieces clicking into place. She blinked, and the noise of the room faded. She didn't see grain or generals. She saw something else. "It's a poem," she whispered. It was so quiet, she didn't think anyone heard her. She hadn't meant to say it aloud, but Julian Thorne had hearing like a wolf. He stopped pacing. The room didn't go silent immediately, but Julian's stillness was contagious. He turned slowly, scanning the room until his eyes landed on the waitress. "Who said that?" Julian asked. Lisa froze. She clutched the water pitcher tight against her chest. "Don't speak," she told herself. "You need this job. The rent is due on Tuesday." "I said," Julian repeated, stepping closer to the service area. "Who said it is a poem?" Professor Sterling scoffed, swiveling in his chair. "Mr. Thorne, please. The catering staff is likely just muttering nonsense. Can we get back to the academic discussion?" "Quiet," Julian hissed at Sterling, never taking his eyes off Lisa. He walked until he was standing, just 2 feet from her. He smelled of expensive cologne and ozone. You said it." Lisa looked up, meeting his gaze. She saw exhaustion in his eyes, buried under the anger. I'm sorry, sir. I was just talking to myself. I'll leave." "You aren't going anywhere," Julian said. He pointed at the screen. "You called it a poem. Why?" "It's ridiculous," Sterling interrupted, standing up. "She's a waitress, for God's sake. She probably thinks it's a menu item from a take-out flyer." Something in Lisa snapped. Maybe it was the 6 hours of standing. Maybe it was the months of overdue bills. Or maybe it was Sterling's arrogance, dismissing the beautiful tragic language on the screen as a take-out menu. She straightened her spine. "Because the rhyming structure is tonal," Lisa said, her voice clear and steady. "It's not seal script. It's birdworm seal script, a decorative variation used exclusively by the concubines of the Chu state during the Warring States period to pass messages without the eunuch's understanding. It's not about generals or grain." The silence in the room was absolute. Even the rain hitting the windows seemed to stop. Julian stared at her, his expression unreadable. "Go on." Lisa walked past Sterling, ignoring his gasp of indignation. She stood before the massive screen. She felt small next to the glowing image, but the characters felt like old friends. "The first character isn't harvest," she said, pointing to the jagged mark Dr. Chen had identified. In the Chu dialect, specifically the southern variation, this radical implies setting or descending. And the second character isn't army, it's sun. She turned to Julian. "It doesn't say general's harvest. It says, where the sun descends to drink, the mountain opens its throat." Professor Sterling let out a sharp, derisive laugh. "Creative writing," he sneered, looking around at his colleagues for support. "The girl has a vivid imagination, I'll give her that. Mountain opens its throat? It's gibberish. Mr. Thorne, this is an insult to us. You're letting a servant dictate linguistics to the Ivy League?" Julian didn't look at Sterling. He was watching Lisa's hands. They were shaking slightly, but her eyes were fierce. "Why birdworm script?" Julian asked. "That's an ornamental style. Why would they use it for a vault key?" "Because it's not just writing," Lisa explained, her passion taking over. "It's art. It's meant to be beautiful to the eye, so the mind ignores the meaning. It was a cipher. The women of the Chu court were often spies. They hid secrets in embroidery, in paintings, and in poetry. If you read this as standard text, it's a list of supplies. If you read it phonetically, using the chu tones. Lisa took a deep breath. She began to speak. The sound that came out of her mouth was unlike anything the room had heard. It was melodic, rhythmic, and guttural all at once. It was ancient Mandarin, but with a lilt and a pitch change that sounded almost like singing. It was haunting. Zelan Kwa, Shuomei. As she spoke the final syllable, she looked at the third line of text. The experts are stuck on this line because they think it's a date. It's not. It's a coordinate instructions masked as a metaphor. 3 strides from the vermilion bird. It refers to a constellation, not a bird. Julian pulled out his phone. He typed furiously, accessing his satellite team stationed in China. Sterling, Julian said, his voice flat. What is the topography of the excavation site in Shaanxi? Well, it's mountainous terrain, obviously, Sterling stammered. Is there a body of water? Julian asked. There is a small, dried-up riverbed to the west, Dr. Chen offered. Julian looked at Lisa. Where the sun descends to drink? Sunset, Lisa said. West, the river. Julian pressed the phone to his ear. Team Alpha, this is Thorne. Move the excavation unit 3 kilometers west to the dry riverbed. Look for a rock formation that aligns with the vermilion bird constellation at sunset. Specifically, a throat-like opening. Sir, the voice on the other end crackled over the speakerphone. That area is solid granite. We scanned it. There's nothing. Do it, Julian commanded. Live stream the feed to the boardroom. For 10 agonizing minutes, nothing happened. The 50 experts whispered among themselves, casting angry glares at Lisa. Sterling crossed his arms, a smug smile returning to his face. Mr. Thorne, Sterling said softly. This is a waste of resources. The girl is clearly delusional. I suggest we have security remove her before she embarrasses you further. Lisa felt the blood drain from her face. What if I'm wrong? It had been years since she studied the texts. She was just a waitress now. She had dropped out. She had failed. Maybe Sterling was right. Maybe she was crazy. I'm sorry, Lisa whispered, backing away. I should go. Wait, Julian said. He wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the live feed from China on the secondary screen. On the screen, heavy machinery was clearing away centuries of dirt and rock from the dry riverbed. Sir, the voice on the radio shouted, panic and excitement mixing in the static. Sir, we hit something. The drill. It punched through. The camera zoomed in. As the dust settled, a massive stone slab was revealed. Carved into the granite, unmistakably, was the image of a bird with a snake in its mouth, the symbol of the Chu, and beneath it, a dark, gaping hole leading into the mountain's throat. The room went dead silent. Professor Sterling's mouth fell open. Julian slowly lowered the phone. He turned to the 50 experts. Get out, he said. Mr. Thorne, Sterling began. Get out, Julian roared, the sound shaking the glass walls. All of you, you are fired. Your contracts are void. Leave my building immediately before I have you thrown out. The experts scrambled, gathering their briefcases and tablets, fleeing the room like cockroaches, scattering under a light. Within 60 seconds the room was empty. Only Julian and Lisa remained. Lisa stood by the door, clutching her tray, terrified. She had just humiliated 50 powerful people. She turned to leave, her hand on the door handle. Where do you think you're going? Julian's voice stopped her. She froze. To get the check, sir. For the catering? Julian walked toward her. The predator was gone. In his place was a man who looked like he had just seen a ghost. He stopped a foot away from her, towering over her. Who are you? He asked. And don't tell me you're a waitress. Waitresses don't speak a dead dialect of the Chu state perfectly. Lisa looked down at her scuffed black work shoes. I'm Lisa Vance. Lisa Vance, Julian tested the name. Where did you learn that? My grandfather, she said quietly. He was a curator at the Beijing Palace Museum before the Cultural Revolution. He taught me to read before I could walk. We used to write letters to each other in birdworm script. Used to? He died 4 years ago, she said, the grief still fresh. He left me his library, but I couldn't afford the tuition to finish my degree at Columbia. So I work here. Julian stared at her for a long time. He looked at her cheap uniform, her tired eyes, and her hands that had just unlocked $1 billion secret. You couldn't afford tuition, he repeated, almost to himself. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a black titanium card. He tossed it onto the obsidian table. Mr. Sterling charged me $200,000 for his expertise today, Julian said. He was wrong. You were right. I don't want your money, Mr. Thorne, Lisa said, opening the door. I just want to go home. I'm not offering you charity, Miss Vance, Julian said, his eyes narrowing. I'm offering you a job. Lisa paused. I already have a job. I pour water. Not anymore, Julian said. He walked back to the screen where the live feed showed his team preparing to enter the tomb. That tomb in Shaanxi? It's just the antechamber. The legend of the Sun Tzu vault says there are 3 trials, 3 linguistic traps designed to kill anyone who enters. He turned back to her, a dangerous smirk playing on his lips. My team has guns. They have explosives. But they don't have you. Without a translator who understands the mind of the Creator, they will be dead in an hour. He stepped closer, extending his hand. Come with me to China, Lisa. Help me claim what's inside, and I will pay off your tuition. I will buy your family's house. I will give you a life you never imagined. Lisa looked at his hand. It was a deal with the devil. She knew the stories about Julian Thorne. He was ruthless. He was dangerous. But then she looked at the screen. The script called to her. It was her grandfather's language. It was a mystery waiting to be solved. She took his hand. I pack light, she said. The private jet was a Gulfstream G700, a flying palace that moved faster than the speed of sound. Lisa sat in a cream-colored leather seat, staring out at the clouds. She had changed out of her waitress uniform into clothes Julian's assistant had frantically purchased for her. A silk blouse, tailored trousers, and boots meant for hiking. She felt like an imposter. Across the cabin, Julian was on a secure video call. He was speaking in rapid-fire English, then switching to German, then Japanese. The man was a machine. He ended the call and walked over to her, placing 2 glasses of whiskey on the table. Drink, he said. It helps with the nerves. Lisa ignored the drink. What is in the vault, Julian? It was the first time she had used his first name. He didn't correct her. History says it's gold, Julian said, sitting opposite her. The lost treasury of the warring states. But I don't care about gold. I have enough money to buy God. Then what? Immortality, Julian said. Lisa laughed nervously. You're joking. Julian's face remained stone cold. The scroll of the White Peony. It was rumored to contain the medical formulas of the Emperor's personal alchemist. Formulas for cellular regeneration that modern science is only just beginning to understand. My father, he has early onset Alzheimer's. The best doctors say he has a year. I don't accept that. Lisa softened. The monster had a heart. You're doing this for your father. I'm doing this because I don't lose, Julian corrected, though his eyes betrayed him. Sir, The pilot's voice came over the intercom. "We are beginning our descent into Taiyuan. However, we have a situation." Julian pressed the comms button. "Define situation." "There is another aircraft on the tarmac, sir. It has no transponder, but the tail markings match the sprawling conglomerate owned by Silas Vane." Julian's face darkened. The temperature in the cabin seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Vane!" He spat the name like a curse. "Who is Silas Vane?" Lisa asked, sensing the shift in atmosphere. "My competitor," Julian said, standing up and checking the pistol holstered beneath his jacket. "And the man who likely paid Professor Sterling to give me the wrong translation?" Lisa gasped. "Sterling was a spy?" "Sterling was a stalling tactic," Julian said, looking out the window as the runway rushed up to meet them. "Vane wanted me stuck in New York while he raided the tomb. But thanks to you, we caught up." The plane touched down with a jolt. "Listen to me, Lisa," Julian said, grabbing her shoulders. His grip was firm, desperate. "Vane is not like me. I am a businessman. Vane is a butcher. Once we get to that site, you stay behind me. You read the walls, you solve the puzzles, and you don't stop moving. Do you understand?" "I understand," Lisa said, her heart pounding against her ribs. The jet door opened, and the humid air of the Shaanxi night rushed in. But it wasn't empty air. Bang! A bullet ricocheted off the frame of the door, inches from Julian's head. "Sniper!" Julian yelled, shoving Lisa back into the cabin. "Get down!" He slammed the button to close the door, but another shot rang out, shattering the window of the cockpit. "They aren't just here to race us," Julian growled, pulling Lisa to the floor as the plane's engines whined, trying to turn around. "They're here to bury us." Lisa lay on the floor of the luxury jet, her cheek pressed against the carpet. Just hours ago, her biggest problem was a rude customer, tipping 5%. Now, she was in a war zone with a billionaire. She looked at Julian, who was already on the phone, ordering a tactical team to engage. What does the birdworm script say about survival? She wondered wildly. She remembered her grandfather's favorite saying, "The willow survives the storm because it bends. The oak breaks." "Julian," she said, tugging his sleeve. "Stay down." "No, listen. If Vane is here, he knows where the entrance is, but he doesn't have the key. He doesn't have the translation. He's waiting for us to open it." Julian looked at her, realizing she was right. "He's pinning us down. So let's give him what he wants," Lisa said, her mind racing. "Open the door. Let me talk to them." "Are you insane? They will shoot you." "No," Lisa said, her eyes flashing. "They won't, because I'm the only one who can read the door. Vane needs me." "And what happens when you open it for him? He kills you." "I won't open it correctly," Lisa whispered, a smile touching her lips. "I'll translate it. With a mistake. A mistake that triggers the traps." Julian stared at her. A slow grin spread across his face. "You really aren't just a waitress, are you, Lisa Vance?" "I told you," she said, grabbing her backpack. "I was top of my class." The surrender was calculated chaos. Julian had argued against it, his pride refusing to bow to a man like Silas Vane. But Lisa had been firm. They were outgunned, trapped in a metal tube on an exposed runway. Fighting meant death. Talking meant time. They walked down the air stair of the Gulf Stream, hands raised. The humidity of the Shaanxi night was suffocating, thick with the smell of jet fuel and ozone. Spotlight beams from 3 black SUVs cut through the darkness, blinding them. "Smart choice, Julian," a voice boomed from the shadows. Silas Vane stepped into the light. He was a stark contrast to Julian. Where Julian was sleek, tailored, and modern, Vane was rugged, a former mercenary turned mining magnate. He wore a linen suit that looked slept in and chewed on an unlit cigar. A jagged scar ran from his jaw to his ear, a souvenir from a diamond mine dispute in Sierra Leone. "You're trespassing, Vane," Julian said, his voice steady despite the dozen assault rifles pointed at his chest. "I have the excavation permit for this sector." "And I have the guns," Vane smiled, showing teeth that looked too white against his tanned skin. "Possession is 9/10 of the law, isn't it?" Vane's eyes slid to Lisa. He looked her up and down, not with lust, but with the appraising stare of a man buying a horse. "And this must be the secret weapon," Vane chuckled. "I heard you fired the academic elite of the Western world. Rumor has it a Waitress," corrected Sterling. "Is this her?" "She's my assistant," Julian lied smoothly, stepping slightly in front of her. "She's the key," Vane corrected. He signaled to his men. 2 guards moved forward, grabbing Lisa by the arms. "Don't touch her!" Julian lunged forward, but a rifle butt slammed into his stomach. He doubled over, gasping for air. "Julian!" Lisa screamed, struggling against the guards. Vane walked over to Julian, crouching down to whisper in his ear. "I've been trying to crack the outer seal of that mountain for 2 days. My demolition experts say blasting it will bring the whole mountain down on top of the vault. I need finesse. I need the birdworm script reader." He stood up and nodded to Lisa. "Put them in the lead vehicle. We have a tomb to raid." The drive to the excavation site was a 20-minute blur of bumpy dirt roads and tense silence. Lisa sat squeezed between 2 heavily armed guards, with Julian across from her. His face was pale, his jaw clenched so tight, a muscle feathered in his cheek. "Stick to the plan," Lisa mouthed silently. Julian gave a barely perceptible nod. They arrived at the dried riverbed. It was an impressive operation. Vane had set up floodlights that turned night into day, illuminating the massive granite face of the mountain. The excavation team Julian had called earlier was zip-tied in a corner, guarded by Vane's mercenaries. In the center of the granite wall stood the door. It was breathtaking. 12 feet high, carved from a single slab of black basalt, polished until it reflected the floodlights like a mirror. The surface was covered in the swirling, decorative characters Lisa had seen on the screen. The bird-worm script. It looked less like writing and more like a tangle of vines and serpents. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Vane said, dragging Lisa toward the door. "And entirely impenetrable. My linguist, a poor fellow named Dr. Aris, said the inscription was a curse. He refused to touch it. I shot him." Vane leaned in close to Lisa. "Don't be like Dr. Aris." Lisa stepped up to the black stone. Her hands were trembling, but as soon as her fingers brushed the cold basalt, a strange calm washed over her. She traced the carvings, the depth of the cuts, the flow of the strokes. It was a masterpiece of the Warring States period. "It's not a curse," Lisa said, her voice echoing slightly against the rock. "It's a kinetic lock." "Explain," Vane demanded. The text reads, "The dragon breathes only when the wind dies." Lisa traced a line of characters that spiraled inward toward the center of the door. "It's not just a poem. It's an instruction for air pressure. The door is hermetically sealed. If you try to pry it open, the pressure differential triggers a collapse mechanism." "So how do we open it?" Julian asked, stepping up beside her, shaking off the guard who tried to hold him back. "We don't force it," Lisa said. She pointed to 2 small, hollow depressions on either side of the door, shaped like the open mouths of carp. "We have to equalize the pressure. We have to blow into these." "Blow into them?" Vane laughed. "Like a trumpet." "Like a flute," Lisa corrected. "It requires 2 people, simultaneous airflow, specific rhythm." She looked at Julian. This was the moment, the mistake. The text actually said, "Breath of the innocent releases the lock. Breath of the wicked seals the tomb forever." It didn't mention rhythm, it mentioned intent. But more importantly, the text below it, the part she was hiding from Vane, warned that opening the door would deactivate the air scrubbers inside. The air in the antechamber would be stale, perhaps toxic, or filled with hallucinogenic spores, unless one held their breath immediately upon entry. "I need Julian," Lisa said. "He knows the rhythm. We practiced it on the plane." Vane hesitated, looking between them. He held his pistol loosely. "Fine. But if the door doesn't open, I put a bullet in his knee." Julian moved to the left depression. Lisa took the right. "On 3, Lisa whispered. "And remember, hold it. 1, 2, 3. They leaned in and blew into the stone carvings. A low, resonant hum began to emanate from the mountain. It sounded like a massive cello string being plucked deep underground. The vibration grew louder, shaking the dust from the floodlights. Click, a sound like a massive tumbler falling into place echoed. The black basalt door split down the middle and groaned open, sliding into the rock walls. A gust of stale, ancient air rushed out, smelling of decay and dry earth. "Excellent!" Vane shouted, signaling his team forward. "Move out! Flashlights on!" Lisa grabbed Julian's hand and squeezed it hard. "Hold your breath," the squeeze said. As Vane's men rushed into the darkness, inhaling deeply of the ancient air, Lisa and Julian took massive gulps of the fresh outside air and clamped their mouths shut. Vane, too excited by the gold, didn't notice. He pushed Lisa forward. "Ladies first." They stepped into the throat of the mountain. The antechamber was vast, carved directly out of the mountain's quartz core. Their flashlight beams cut through the gloom, revealing a high vaulted ceiling painted with constellations that hadn't been seen in the sky for 2,000 years. But it was the floor that stole the breath, or would have if Lisa hadn't been holding hers. The floor was a map of the Qin Empire. Rivers were carved into the stone, filled with a silvery liquid that shimmered under the light. Mercury. Lisa's eyes widened. The Silver Rivers legend was true. The first emperor's tomb was famous for it, but this vault, a secret cache of the strategist Sun Tzu, had mimicked the defense. The air was thick with mercury vapor. Vane's men were already coughing. "What is that smell?" One of the mercenaries, a giant named Marcus, hacked, wiping his mouth. "Tastes like metal." Vane frowned, sniffing the air. He covered his nose with a handkerchief. "Mercury. Don't touch the liquid." He looked at Lisa and Julian, who were red-faced, cheeks puffed out, refusing to inhale. Vane realized instantly. "Masks!" he barked at his team. "Put on your gas masks. Now!" He fumbled for his own filtration mask clipped to his belt. Julian and Lisa used the distraction. They exhaled sharply and pulled their shirts up over their noses. Not perfect, but better than nothing, and sprinted toward the far end of the chamber. "Stop them!" Vane choked, struggling with his mask straps. Two mercenaries raised their rifles, but their hands were shaking. The mercury vapor was already affecting their nervous systems. The shots went wild, sparking against the quartz walls. "Run!" Julian yelled, pulling Lisa behind a massive stone pillar. They were halfway across the map of China. The Silver River blocked their path to the next doorway. It was 10 feet wide, a pool of deadly liquid metal. "We can't jump that," Lisa said, her voice muffled by her shirt. Julian looked up. Above the river hung heavy bronze chains, likely remnants of an old pulley bridge that had rotted away. "I can jump to the chain," Julian said, assessing the distance. "I'll swing across and find a plank or a rope to throw back to you." "No time," Lisa pointed back. Vane had his mask on now, and his eyes were murderous. He was marching across the map, stepping over the coughing bodies of his own men, who hadn't been fast enough. He raised his pistol, aiming carefully this time. "Lisa, look at the wall." Julian pointed to a series of stone tiles protruding from the wall above the Mercury River. They were carved with animals: tiger, crane, monkey, bear, deer. The 5 animal frolics, Lisa realized. It's ancient Qigong exercises. It's a sequence. Which one is safe? Julian shouted, as a bullet chipped the pillar inches from his face. Lisa closed her eyes, visualizing the texts she had studied in her grandfather's dusty attic. The tiger strikes, the deer leaps, the bear stands firm. "The deer!" she shouted. "It's the only one that implies jumping over an obstacle." "Are you sure?" "No. Go." Julian didn't hesitate. He broke from cover, sprinting toward the edge of the Mercury River. He leaped, aiming for the stone tile carved with the deer. He landed on it with one foot. The tile held. "Jump!" he yelled back at her. Lisa ran. She wasn't an athlete. She was a girl who carried heavy trays for 12 hours a day. But adrenaline is a powerful fuel. She launched herself over the silvery death trap. She fell short. Her fingers scrabbled against the edge of the deer tile. Her legs dangled dangerously close to the mercury pool. "I've got you!" Julian grabbed her wrist, his grip like iron. He hauled her up onto the narrow ledge, just as Vane reached the edge of the river on the other side. Vane fired 3 shots. Ping! 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 They struck the stone wall just below their feet. "You can't run forever!" Vane shouted, his voice distorted by the gas mask. "There's only one way out, and I'm holding the door." Julian pulled Lisa through the archway, on the other side of the river, into the next corridor. "He's right," Julian said, breathless. "We're trapping ourselves inside." "We're not trapping ourselves," Lisa said, looking down the dark tunnel. "We're leading him into the trials." "That was the first trial?" Julian asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. "The Mercury?" "No," Lisa said grimly. "That was the foyer. The first true trial is ahead. The Hall of Echoes." They moved deeper. The air here was clearer, the mercury vapor left behind. The corridor opened into a perfectly circular room made of polished jade. The floor was covered in fine, white sand. In the center of the room stood a pedestal with a single, glowing orb. "It's too quiet," Julian whispered. "Shh," Lisa hissed, freezing in place. She pointed to the walls. Embedded in the jade walls were thousands of tiny holes. "Acoustic triggers," Lisa mouthed, barely making a sound. "The birdworm script calls this the Room of 1,000 Ears. Any sound above a heartbeat triggers the mechanism." Julian looked at the sand. It was bone white. He crouched down and touched it. It wasn't sand. It was bone dust. Ground down calcium from the previous intruders who had made a noise. They had to cross 50 feet of bone dust to reach the exit door on the other side. Julian pointed to his boots. They were heavy, leather, hard-soled. He pointed to Lisa's boots. Same. They couldn't walk without making a sound. The crunch of the bone dust would be enough to kill them. Lisa looked around desperately. Vane would be behind them in minutes. He would have found a way across the mercury by now. She looked at the pedestal in the center. The orb. She took a step, and the crunch of her boot seemed deafening in the silence. Click. From the wall to her right, a mechanism engaged. Lisa threw herself flat onto the sand, just as a crossbow bolt, preserved for 2 millennia, whistled through the air where her head had been. Julian froze. He looked at Lisa, eyes wide. "Don't move," he signaled. But they heard footsteps echoing from the corridor behind them. Heavy, angry footsteps. Vane was coming. Lisa looked at the sand. She slowly unlaced her boots. She signaled Julian to do the same. Socks. They had to walk in socks. They shimmied out of their boots, leaving them behind. Julian helped Lisa up, moving with the grace of a ghost. They stepped onto the bone dust. Soft. Silent. They made it to the center pedestal. The orb wasn't a light source. It was a massive pearl, the size of a grapefruit. The dragon's eye, Lisa breathed, silently. They crept toward the exit door. It was blocked by a puzzle lock, 3 rotating rings of stone. Lisa knelt by the lock. She needed to focus. She needed to read the faint carvings on the rings. But her heart was hammering so loud she was afraid the walls would hear it. From the entrance tunnel, a shadow emerged. Silas Vane stepped into the jade room. He had shed his gas mask. He held a submachine gun. He saw them at the far end. Vane didn't know about the acoustic triggers. "End of the line!" Vane shouted. The sound hit the walls like a physical blow. The room came alive. Click, 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 click. Thousands of triggers disengaged simultaneously. "Down!" Julian tackled Lisa, covering her body with his own as the walls erupted. It wasn't just one arrow. It was a rain of steel. Thousands of bronze quarrels shot from the walls, crisscrossing the room in a grid of death. Vane screamed. Julian and Lisa huddled against the base of the puzzle door, the only blind spot in the room. They heard the thwack, thwack, thwack of arrows hitting flesh and shattering against the jade floor. Then silence returned. Julian slowly lifted his head. "Is he dead?" Lisa peeked over his shoulder. In the center of the room, Silas Vane was on one knee. He was bleeding from a graze on his shoulder and another on his thigh. But he was alive. He had dropped behind the center pedestal just in time, using the stone column as cover. He looked up, his eyes burning with a rage that transcended sanity. He raised his gun, aiming it directly at them across the field of scattered arrows. "Open the door," Vane whispered, his voice trembling with fury. "Open it, or I blow us all to hell right here." Lisa turned to the lock. The rings. Outer ring, the heaven. Middle ring, the man. Inner ring, the earth. She spun the rings. Heaven aligns with rain. Man aligns with war. Earth aligns with harvest, she whispered. Click. The door behind them hissed open. "Get in," Julian said, grabbing her. They rolled backward into the darkness of the next chamber, just as Vane opened fire. Bullets sparked against the closing stone door, sealing them in. They were safe from the bullets. But as Lisa stood up, and the dim phosphorescent moss on the walls illuminated the room, she realized they had made a terrible mistake. They weren't in a room. They were standing on a narrow ledge overlooking a vast, subterranean abyss, and hanging from the ceiling, suspended by massive chains over the darkness, was a floating palace, the tomb of Sun Tzu. But standing on the bridge between them and the palace was a figure clad in ancient, rusted armor. It wasn't a statue. It moved. The Guardian turned its head, the metal grinding with a sound that made Lisa's teeth ache. "Julian," Lisa whispered, "that's not a mechanism." Julian pulled out a small pocket knife, his only weapon against a 7-foot tall armored sentinel. "I think we found the second trial," he said. The figure on the bridge was a nightmare of bronze and iron. It stood 7 feet tall, its armor crafted to resemble the scales of a dragon, overlapping plates, shifting with a sound like grinding teeth. It wielded a guandao, a massive polearm with a heavy, crescent-shaped blade that gleamed even in the dim light of the abyss. "It's an automaton," Julian said, his voice tight. "Clockwork, driven by water or mercury pressure from the river below." "It doesn't matter what powers it," Lisa said, backing away as the sentinel took a heavy step forward, the stone bridge trembling under its weight. "It matters that it wants to kill us." The sentinel lunged. The movement was impossibly fast for something so heavy. The blade slashed through the air, missing Julian's chest by inches as he dove to the side. The steel tip sparked against the stone railing, slicing through the rock like butter. "Go!" Julian shouted, scrambling to his feet. "Run for the palace gates. I'll draw its attention." You can't fight that thing with a pocket knife, Lisa screamed. I'm not fighting it. I'm distracting it. Julian picked up a loose stone and hurled it at the sentinel's helmet. Clang! The machine stopped, its faceless visage turning slowly toward the billionaire. It raised the polearm high, preparing for a killing blow. Lisa froze. She looked at the bridge. The floor was inlaid with tiles, similar to the Mercury River, but these bore single, large characters. The sentinel wasn't just walking. It was following a pattern. It moved in a jagged line, north, west, south, the steps of the U, the ritual dance of the ancient shaman kings used to calm floods. Julian, don't move, Lisa yelled. Julian was backing up, sweat drenching his shirt. Lisa, if you have a brilliant linguistic insight, now is the time. It's not attacking you because you're an intruder, she shouted, her eyes scanning the floor tiles. It's attacking you because you're off beat. The bridge is a music box. Every step vibrates a tumbler in the mechanism. Lisa stepped onto the bridge. She didn't run. She stepped onto the first tile, the character for thunder. She landed with a heavy, deliberate stomp. A deep, resonant thrum echoed from inside the bridge. The sentinel froze mid-swing. Its head snapped toward Lisa. Lisa, get back! Julian roared. Trust me! She yelled. She took another step. Wind. She moved lightly this time. A soft tap. The note changed. Higher, sharper. The sentinel lowered its weapon slightly. It turned its body, mirroring her movement. It wasn't an enemy. It was a partner. It was designed to dance. We have to dance with it, Julian, Lisa said, moving to the third tile. Fire. If we break the rhythm, it resets to defense mode and kills us. Match my pace. Julian stared at her for a split second, then realized she was right. He was a man of logic, of patterns. He watched her feet. He stepped onto the bridge. Thunder. Stomp. The sentinel bowed. Left foot, mountain, Lisa commanded. They moved together, a strange, desperate waltz on a bridge suspended over an endless void. Stomp, slide, tap, turn. With every correct step, the iron giant backed away, retreating toward the palace gates, its gears whirring in a rhythmic harmony. They were 10 feet from the gates. The sentinel had stepped aside, becoming a statue once more. They were going to make it. Boom! The sound of an explosion tore through the cavern. Debris rained down from the ceiling. Behind them, the stone door to the Jade Room, the one they had sealed, imploded. Silas Vane stepped through the smoke, his face bloody, his suit shredded, but his submachine gun raised. He hadn't solved the lock. He had used C4 plastic explosives to blow the hinges. "Enough games!" Vane screamed, his voice echoing over the abyss. He didn't aim at them. He aimed at the bridge supports. Rat-a-tat-tat-tat. The bullets chewed through the ancient chains holding the bridge. The stone walkway lurched violently, dropping 3 feet. Lisa lost her footing. She slid toward the edge of the abyss. "Lisa!" Julian lunged, catching her hand just as she slipped over the side. He slammed his chest against the stone, the wind knocked out of him, holding her dangling weight over the darkness. Vane began to walk across the bridge, careful to step where they had stepped, though the sentinel was now twitching, the rhythm broken by the gunfire. "Pull her up, Thorn," Vane sneered, leveling the gun at Julian's head. "Then turn around and open the palace doors. If you try anything else, I shoot her and watch her fall." Julian gritted his teeth, his muscles screaming, as he hauled Lisa back onto the bridge. She collapsed, gasping for breath. "You're a persistent man, Vane," Julian spat, standing up and shielding Lisa. "I'm a businessman," Vane smiled, blood coating his teeth. "And I'm here to collect my bonus. Open the door." Julian looked at Lisa. She nodded weakly. She pointed to the inscription on the palace gate. It wasn't a puzzle. It was a simple statement. "Enter, and leave your burdens behind." Julian pushed the heavy timber doors. They swung open silently. The interior of the Sun Tzu vault was not what anyone expected. There were no mountains of gold coins. There were no statues of jade. It was a garden, a perfectly preserved subterranean ecosystem. Bioluminescent fungi coated the ceiling like stars, casting a pale blue light over trees with leaves of silver foil and flowers carved from amethyst and ruby. In the center of the garden stood a simple wooden altar. On it lay a single scroll case made of white jade, the scroll of the white peony. "It's real," Julian whispered, the exhaustion falling away from his face. "The cellular regeneration formulas. The cure." "Grab it," Vane ordered, prodding Julian in the back with the gun, "and then step away." They walked through the silver forest. The air here was sweet, smelling of ozone and crushed flowers. As they reached the altar, Lisa saw the floor around it was made of a strange, translucent crystal. "Wait," Lisa said sharply. "Don't touch it!" "Shut up!" Vane snapped. He shoved Julian aside and stepped up to the altar. His eyes were wide with greed. He wasn't seeing a cure for Alzheimer's. He was seeing billions of dollars in pharmaceutical patents. "Mine." He reached out and grabbed the jade case. Click. The sound came from beneath the crystal floor. "You idiot," Lisa whispered. Suddenly, the crystal floor beneath Vane flashed red. A mechanical voice, amplified by the acoustics of the room, boomed in ancient Mandarin. "The thief takes. The guest receives. Balance is lost." The entire room shook. The entrance doors slammed shut behind them. "What did you do?" Vane shouted, clutching the scroll case. "It's a weight trap," Lisa said, her mind racing as she translated the glyphs glowing under their feet. "But not for physical weight. It measures conductivity. No. Heat? Heart rate?" She looked at the text circling the altar. "Only the hand that gives may hold the peony." "It's a biofeedback mechanism," Lisa realized, looking at Vane. "It's measuring intent. The ancient Chinese doctors believed the pulse changed with greed. It's detecting your adrenaline, your cortisol. It knows you're stealing it." "Superstitious garbage," Vane yelled. He turned to run, but the crystal floor beneath him suddenly liquefied. It wasn't crystal. It was a non-Newtonian fluid suspension, kept solid by vibration. The mechanism had stopped the vibration. Vane plunged waist-deep into the floor. He screamed as the fluid began to harden again instantly, trapping him like a fly in amber. The pressure crushed his legs. The scroll case flew from his hand, sliding across the floor toward Julian. Julian dived for it, catching the jade case before it hit the fluid. "Julian, don't hold it," Lisa warned. "If you try to keep it, the trap will take you too." Julian looked at the scroll in his hands. Then he looked at Vane, who was sinking deeper, the floor swallowing his chest. Vane fired his gun blindly, bullets shattering the amethyst flowers. "Help me!" Vane shrieked. The ceiling began to groan. Cracks appeared in the stone. The self-destruct sequence had begun. The garden was collapsing. "We have to leave the scroll!" Lisa cried, grabbing Julian's arm. "The inscription says, 'Leave your burdens behind.' The scroll is the burden. If we take it, the tomb collapses to keep it safe." Julian looked at the jade case. He thought of his father, sitting in a wheelchair, forgetting his own name. He had spent $10 million and risked his life for this. He looked at Lisa. She was terrified, dirt-streaked, and alive. "I can't lose this," Julian whispered. "You will lose your life." Lisa pulled him. "Julian, please." Julian looked at Vane, who was now buried up to his neck, his eyes bulging. Vane had refused to let go of his greed, and the mountain was claiming him. Julian made his choice. He didn't drop the scroll. He opened the case. He ripped the parchment out. "What are you doing?" Lisa screamed. "I'm not taking the scroll," Julian yelled over the roar of falling rocks. "I'm taking the knowledge." He pulled out his smartphone. He snapped 3 high-resolution photos of the ancient text. Then he threw the empty jade case and the parchment back onto the altar. The rumbling stopped instantly. The red light in the floor faded to blue. The trap reset. "Run!" Julian grabbed Lisa's hand. They sprinted back through the silver forest, past the frozen, half-buried head of Silas Vane, whose eyes were open in a silent scream of eternal preservation. They reached the doors just as they began to seal again. They squeezed through the gap, tumbling onto the bridge. The iron sentinel was still motionless. They didn't stop running. They ran past the sentinel, through the jade room, leaped over the Mercury River, using the plank Vane had laid down, and burst out into the cool night air of the Shangxi Valley. Behind them, a deep, mournful groan echoed from the mountain, as if the dragon was going back to sleep. 3 days later, New York City. The boardroom was quiet, but this time there were no experts, only Julian Thorne and Lisa Vance. Julian stood by the window, looking out at the city. "The photos were clear enough," he said softly. "My R&D team says the chemical compounds described in the text are radical, but synthesized. They could reverse neural degeneration by 40%. It's not immortality, but it's time. It gives my father 5 more years." He turned to Lisa. She was wearing a new dress, simple but elegant. She no longer looked like the waitress who poured water. "I wired the tuition to Columbia," Julian said, "and I bought your mother's house. The deed is in your bag." "Thank you," Lisa said. She felt strange. The adventure was over. She was supposed to go back to school, back to normal. "However," Julian continued, walking toward the table, "I have a problem." "A problem?" "I fired my entire linguistic department," Julian said, a rare, genuine smile touching his lips. "And I have a lead on a sunken library off the coast of Alexandria. I can't read ancient Greek, and I certainly don't trust anyone from Oxford anymore." He slid a contract across the obsidian table. "Head of Historical Acquisitions," Julian read the title. "Starting salary is 7 figures, plus hazard pay." Lisa looked at the contract. Then she looked at Julian. She thought of the library, the smell of old books, the rush of the puzzle. "I have conditions," Lisa said. Julian raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" "No more experts," she said, picking up the pen. "And I don't pour the coffee." Julian laughed. It was a sound of freedom. "Deal." What a ride. From a waitress pouring water to the head of acquisitions hunting lost libraries, Lisa Vance just proved that knowledge is the ultimate power. But here is a question for you guys. Did Julian make the right choice? Should he have tried to take the physical scroll and risked the trap, or was the photo enough? I want to see your debates in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow and tells me you want more billionaire adventure thrillers. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss the next episode, where we might just find out what's hiding in that sunken library in Alexandria. Thanks for watching, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next story.